So I'm excited for two reasons. One is my bet was that there would be 6 people or less in the conference, and you have got over that, so I'm super excited. So that's over 6. And I also have a great voice today, because yesterday I had maybe too much beer, and so today I have a nice kind of a suave, interesting voice to do the presentation for you guys. So today we're going to talk about how to maintain, evolve, and maximize your return on investment on a Drupal website. So it's very business-oriented as a conference, so I'm not going to up in any code. I'm not going to talk about, stuff like Git and Varnish or whatever it is. But I'm going to try to bridge the gap between when you have internally or for a client a project that you want to move forward, or you want to make sure that this is going to be lasting, a lasting investment that you guys are doing in a platform or an application or whatever, and how to make sure that it's going to stand the test of time, and how to explain that case to the people who need to make those decisions. So that's the reason why we're here today. So first of all, I'm going to give you a bit about me. Why is this an interesting topic to cover? But then I'm going to talk about the cost of inaction. So that's something that salespeople like to talk about, where they go on and on about, like, yeah, but if you don't invest, something bad is going to happen. So it's kind of a fear-mongering. But at the same time, it is, otherwise we wouldn't have insurance, because stuff does happen. On the other side, we're going to go on the positive ends of why we should be maintaining Drupal websites and what's the benefits to that. Then I'm going to get into a couple of how we can view enhancements and maintenance of a website in different types of perspective, technically, and different how we can divide the work you do on maintenance on a website into different categories. And then finally, I'm going to give you an idea of how to have a rule of thumb of how much you should be investing in maintenance going forward in an application or a website. So first, a little bit about Symmetris. So Symmetris was founded 14 years ago. I'm the founder. We've been working with Drupal since Drupal 5, so not 14 years ago. We started, maybe like 11 years ago we started with Drupal. We do a lot of Drupal maintenance. About 1/3 of our revenue is ongoing maintenance or enhancements of existing websites. So a lot of agencies like to create new projects and then just leave it there and create a new project. And we like to create projects and make sure that project lasts and evolves throughout time, and that creating the website is like just the first phase of like 7 phases that are going to be ongoing on the project. And we've been sponsors at Drupal Camp for 7 years. We've been presenting for several years here and in Ottawa and in Toronto. So we've been a part of the community for a while. This is our team. The team has been changing a lot. I think it's like a 2-year-old picture. So a couple of the guys here are no longer with us. We're with other agencies and stuff. I'm president of Symmetris, so I told you a bit about myself. I have 2 little children. I'm actually, after this, I'm going to la fête de la garderie of my oldest one. And I like to travel a lot. I'm doing a little less traveling since the children are like that young. They're like 2 and 5. But when the younger one gets to be 3 or 4 years old, I'm going to be able to do more traveling down the line. So I was talking about the post-launch kind of syndrome I was saying. So for me, considering a website and efforts regarding a website to be only related to major launches or releases is for me a problem. It's what I call the post-launch syndrome, where, and even now I have clients in large organizations who everything is based on, we're going to launch this website, and then nothing happens for like 5 years, and then 2 years before the end of that 5 years, they kind of start thinking, yeah, our website is yucky and old, and we got to redo this website. And so they're never thinking of, let's keep this maintained. So in all kinds of other contexts, you're going to maintain stuff. So if you have if you're in an office, in a building, you're expecting that building to be maintained, to be upkept, to have people sweep the floor, to have people do renovations to keep it. But when you do a website, so many people don't think of all these things, and they kind of say it's going to just break in a couple of years, and then we'll replace it with something better, and we'll just say, how could we have been so stupid to build that website back then that way? Drupal is a standard now, so let's say like if we're going back to 2008, like, wow, man, that's such a while ago. Obama was elected president, and back in the day, there was a lot of competing technologies. Not as much as like earlier than then, but still, you know, there's like people had a lot of homemade CMS systems and stuff like that, and it was still not clear who was getting out of the market. But right now, there are clear CMSs that are positioned in the market. In the kind of larger enterprise scale, there's Drupal, there's usually competitors as Sitecore and Adobe Experience Manager. In kind of a lower scale, you got the WordPress and the other competitors around that. But those are becoming standards, so it's easier to find people who know these technologies. So not being able to invest in the ongoing of your website because you can't find people who know how to use it is no longer an excuse. And you know, I can't imagine my world today without, you know, phones and computers or whatever, and it's a cornerstone of any communication strategy and even interacting with your clients or your partners or whatever. It's all being done through the web, and usually the hub of that is your website. And you know, we've been doing a lot of other types of projects too, so like applications and intranets and stuff like that, and it's always web-based, and there's always like the CMS behind it, and these things are crucial to the business, and businesses who don't see the web as being an important part of their kind of marketing mix or even just communication and operations, like I think they need to kind of get in touch with the reality, because we can't move forward without digital technologies in the future, and today actually. There's a couple of exceptions in where you do not need or want or should maintain or make your website evolve. So I got a couple of examples here on the board. A super old site. Like if this thing, you kind of try to fix something, everything breaks. So you should, you know, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And that, in those cases, yes, a full kind of redesign, replatforming is usually a good idea. If your site is in D6, which is no longer maintained by the community, yes, you can continue enhancing it, but there's so much more potential in D8 that, like, why would you invest? And especially there's so few developers who either know or remember how to develop in Drupal 6. Like, why would you invest in that instead of building something new? So that's another case. If it's a website that's not at all strategically important to your organization, and that's what I was saying a bit earlier, is like, you gotta ask your question, like, why is my website or my intranet or whatever not important for my organization? That's another kind of existential question to ask. But if it has no strategic importance, then don't invest, obviously. One-off websites, so kind of like, you know, mini microsites for a campaign of this and that, obviously are not things that you need to upgrade and enhance throughout time, unless it's part of like a multi-site. I know a bit earlier they were talking about all the websites that McGill has. We have clients that have, we created a kind of a site factory for them, not using the, because I don't know what level of familiarity you have, but Acquia has this module called Site Factory that builds websites. But we created a site factory, you know, on our own for one of our clients because that was kind of overkill. So in that context, yes, you should upgrade the kind of ecosystem because it's not one-off sites. But if you have these little, you know, oh, I have a little campaign and this weekend come to our store because of this thing, and that is never going to be used again, then obviously we don't need to upgrade that. And if you're hesitating between, hey, should I be upgrading from D7 to D8? Well, you know what? I gave that exact conference last year, so you can go and find it on our website. Or I'm going to provide the slides for this conference. At the end, it says link, and it's in blue, but I have not put the link yet into my PowerPoint, so I will have to put it in there, to a either last year's kind of audio of the conference, or I also have a slide share. So that's the cases where this conference does not apply. Okay, so, and that's like, you know, I like to build my proposals that way, saying this does not include, so I'm just telling you this conference does not include these items. So let's get into the cost of inaction. So what happens, what are the risks, what are the fears, what should keep you awake at night if you're not maintaining or evolving your Drupal website? So first, and I'm going to do it kind of for every type of persona or category of person who might be involved in this type of decision. So first of all, your organization itself potentially, and also, yeah, just kind of a nuance. I'm really approaching this on the website angle. So I'm not talking about intranets and applications, though all this kind of applies. But I'm going to take it really from the angle of a website. So types of stuff like this, like losing market share, obviously are much more related to marketing websites as opposed to an intranet or something like that. So loss of market share, because you're not going to have that credibility. Someone's going to go to your website like, geez, when did these guys, do anything on their website? They don't update anything. This looks super old. It's not working on my phone. So you're losing credibility as an organization. That's first thing. Second, there's going to be a higher long-term cost, and this is kind of hidden, where it seems like you're not spending this year on your website, and that's great. And then you're going to have budget next year, but then next year you're going to have to spend some time fixing stuff, and the stuff you're going to want to add to the website are going to be more costly because you haven't been ongoing, developing and maintaining this thing. So it's kind of a hidden cost that's difficult to see, and that's when the clients say, hey, I just want to add a contact form to my website. How come, that's 25 hours of work or whatever? And I'm like, oh yeah, well, because of this, because of that, because of that. But all these questions or conditions would not have been there had we been constantly maintaining the website. And what happens is that you have more of it. It makes me think of the concept back in, again, 2008. I guess that's our Back to the Future year, where it's the kind of black swan event where there's this crash, or like there was Drupal get on last year. So you're more vulnerable to these things if you're not maintaining your website. So that's for the organization itself. Secondly, for the developers, you might have developers in-house, you might have developers out-house, or anyway, external developers. You're going to have less dependable results, okay? So there's going to be more bugs when you're going to be fixing stuff. There's going to be less predictability on the availability of being able to do those enhancements because you don't have a steady stream of work. And when you're going to get into something and you're going to do that fix, it's going to be someone who hasn't been working on this website for a super long time. There's maybe no documentation on that part of the website. Or it might be someone who never worked on that website. So it's going to be longer and more complicated and more risky to do an enhancement to the website if it's been a while, like a year and a half, 2 years, and nobody has touched this thing. And there's probably security patches and stuff that have to be installed at the same time. Is that going to break something else? So there's a lot of uncertainty there. For your IT team, so now there's the developers who kind of the digital thing, and then the IT. Usually they kind of are within the scope of IT. Depending on the organization, the website is in IT or in marketing. Sometimes it's in digital, which is like the ideal situation. But oftentimes it's the end of the day, if the website is down, it's not the fault of marketing, it's the fault of IT. So there's more risk. And that's basically, that's the fuel of an IT team is risk. They love stuff that could explode in their face. And so there's more risk to security, and there's more vulnerabilities as the site kind of is static and the world evolves around it. And then there's this vulnerability that has been identified, or this patch that hasn't been applied, so that it becomes more and more vulnerable. And there's more stuff that it's not going to be compatible with, and that's in the sense where the rest of your organization is going to evolve. You might have a new ERP, a new this or whatever, and that old version of the website doesn't have the ability to connect with these new systems in your organization and to share data or whatever. So you're going to have to do like weird kind of ways to interact with the data elsewhere. So you're just adding risk to this platform. There's also going to be an impact on performance, so it's going to be less performant, and they're going to be doing a lot of patches in the sense where each time you're going to update that website, again, as I was mentioning earlier, people don't have kind of the full picture when they get in there, so they're going to patch something, and then someone a couple months or years later is going to patch something else, and all of this is going to be doing out of context from one or the other, and then at the end, in French, the guy from France in my team used to call it une usine à gaz. I don't know what the exact version in English is, but it's basically, it's not efficient at all, and it's kind of full of patches, and it's kind of full of, hidden vulnerabilities. For the marketing team, so that's the other kind of side that I was talking about, there's going to be bad decisions made. Obviously there's a lot of bad marketing decisions that are made in general, because a lot of people like to imagine that what they like is what all their clients like, and they're not doing this in a very, systematic or rational fashion. But at the same time, if those people know what they're doing, they're going to be able to extract data and make decisions on that data. And if your website is not maintained and updated, then again, you're going to lose track of the data, or the data you're catching is not going to be integrated with the new systems, it's not going to be relevant. So you're going to say, hey, I think I need this new module on my website because I heard one client mention it, and you should have been investing that money elsewhere. So that's a risk for the marketing team. And secondly, what happens is this website is built. When it's built, it's like this amazing event. It's like everybody's having champagne. We finally did it. This website represents our organization. But marketing evolves constantly. Like 3 months later, your website is going to be out of date. So it's not going to be, there's not going to be no flexibility, because you can't plan at like 3 years ahead of something you're going to need as a module. For marketing, life is going to happen. You can plan a couple of things, not everything. And so if the website's not being updated, it's not going to be flexible. It's not going to be doing stuff that your marketing campaign is supposed to be doing. And you're going to be letting go more and more of that website, and you're going to do all kinds of side campaigns on other platforms. And then there's going to be, it's so complicated to do this thing on the website because it's so rigid. We're going to do this thing on the side. And then there's going to be all these weird, and then the digital ecosystem is going to be completely ripped apart. And then what's happened is you're going to have wasted that investment in your website initially, because you're not reinvesting in it, ongoing. And finally, pre-last, the website administrators, we got to consider those people, because they're constantly interacting with the back end. It's going to be time consuming to enter data, especially at the beginning, to put everything in there. And then it's like when you move into a new home. Let's say the home was just brand new and you get into there, or you move into a home that someone has lived in before. Like when you move into a brand new home, and then you're like, hey, you know what? It really looked great on those pictures of the architecture, whatever the person gave me. But you know what? It's not really practical to have this thing here in the kitchen. This would be, I'd need like a more counter space here. And then after a year or two, you do those little renovations, and then like, the kitchen is functional, and I can interact for real with this thing. And the same thing is going to happen with the website. At the beginning, we're going to build it all up, and data entry is going to go well. And then you're going to realize, you know what? We have this workflow of approval that we're doing this Excel file on the side to say which pages have been approved by which guy before he published them. And then you're like, if only that could be. And so this these workflows around data entry and publication are going to get sidetracked and are not going to be optimized. And there's going to be other types of content you're going to want to create, and you won't be updating the website, so you're going to kind of try to hack a standard page with the HTML or like tables in it to do something, and then your pages are not going to be coherent from one to the next. So this is all the stuff that's going to happen if you're not constantly updating the website, incrementally based on your needs and the market. And obviously all this is going to be less efficient, and people are going to be less motivated, and it becomes a bore and a chore to add content to the website, and so people don't do it so much, and then suck with you. And finally for the website visitors, it kind of comes up to the first slide, but they're going to lose trust in that organization. The website, even though when it was imagined at the start was all great, then it's not going to adapt to what really is going on in the stats of the website. It's going to be difficult to find information. It's like every website, every request I get for a website or an enhancement, there's always, it's difficult to find information. The search doesn't work so well. I wish everything, like what they want in their head, they want basically the old page of Yahoo with all the links of all the categories at the same place. Now I'm maybe going back too far back for some people here. I don't know, it depends, yeah, right? But at the same time, they want it to look streamlined like Google, So so just put a search box, and all the content is going to appear whenever I type and think of something. And then they say, I don't want to spend more than 10 hours on the search module, but I want it to be as efficient as Google. And so that's a really difficult conversation to have with clients and explain to them, and then blah, blah, blah. And then you got this solar and other stuff we can implement. But then these are all hours we're adding, and then they kind of, oh yeah, okay, so maybe I should have thought of information architecture or adapting stuff. So that's the fear mongering is ended. So that's the end of that part. Now let's go into the happy valley of all the benefits and nice stuff we can have if we are constantly updating this website and making sure that it is up to date, but also has the features that are interesting for the users and the organization. We're going to go through the same different categories of people. So for the organization itself, there's a reduced total cost of ownership. So that's something that I'm trying to bring forward more and more when I'm having discussions about websites, because people often see the upfront cost of a website, but never think of the ongoing cost. And when they do think of the ongoing cost, they're like, oh yeah, hosting. Yeah, but there's other stuff on top of that. So we have to kind of have that conversation where you're saying, what is this website going to cost over the next 3 to 4 years? And do we have like a roadmap for that? And the first year, yes, there's going to be a larger upfront cost, but the following years, we have to plan a budget to maintain this website and not say that this year I have a budget for my website, and the next year is going to be like a reactionary budget where, oh, I have a bug, I have to fix it, let's find some money for that. Or, hey, this guy in the marketing team had this idea, let's do that. So there has to be something planned out in the long term. And if you're constantly updating and upgrading your website, then that long term is going to last longer. So, and that's the whole concept of my presentation, where the return on investment of your initial investment in the website, instead of lasting maybe 3 years, 4 years, you're going to be able to stretch it over to 6 maybe. And that's significant. It's like adding like, is it 30% or anyway, something like that. A value to your website, and that money you can reinvest in adding value to the website as opposed to just doing another redesign and starting from scratch every time. So yeah, I basically said those 2 bullets. For your developers, when we know that we're going to be deploying regularly and enhancing this website regularly, we're going to put in place structures for this deployment. And so that means the deployment is going to be thought out, and it's going to be regular, and it's going to be streamlined. A bit earlier today also there was a conference about continuous integration. That's like the holy grail of being able to just kind of press a button and like push a branch, and everything is automatically tested and deployed on the website, and that would be great. And that's where we tend to go, but you have the time, and it's worth the investment to do so if you're going to have regular deployments at regular intervals. It doesn't need to be like every 2 weeks, but it could be every month, 2 months or whatever, but there's these little incremental enhancements. And those deployments, since they're smaller, there's less risk. So I'm just going to add this little feature that's not too big, and then pushing up, everything's still standing great. Because if we're adding, let's say, let's do a next phase, and we're adding 1,000 hours of work that next phase, and then kind of pushing it in, and that's like a huge effort, and the way it could break, or the impact on the content of the website, and should we, how are we going to, there's a live website, and then there's the pre-production website, and this is the enhanced version, but that's not the enhanced version, and what's it going to be, overwritten, so that kind of debate is less intense when we're just adding, we're adding the equivalent of 50 hours of work, 100 hours of work a time, so that's easier to kind of chew, and makes it more predictable. So, predictable, yes, on the risk side, but also on the development side. So you say, hey team, we're going to be giving you regularly this amount of work, and then so we're going to have like a backlog of stuff to do, and we're going to add it in there as it comes, and we're going to prioritize with you guys, and that makes that the website development team has a regular flow. They don't have to get out of the project and kind of read all the documentation and get back into the project. The project managers as well. So all that makes it easier to plan what's coming up and know when it's going to be deployed. It also allows room, since we know we're going to be spending time, let's say, because life happens, there's like a lull and in some month or whatever, there's not that many things in the backlog. Well then, hey, maybe we can propose stuff and say, based on our experience with this website, this thing would be really a great enhancement. That's not stuff that you can do when you're you have a client or an internal team who says, well, I don't want to invest in the website this year, so you're going to restrict as many hours as you want, and you're not going to propose stuff because you know it won't be accepted. For the IT team, there's less risk. So we talked about risk. So it's the opposite side of it. Better performance as well. So everything is well integrated and scalable. The marketing team can reach more customers because, you know, touch points in the digital world just constantly evolve. Like a week or two ago, I was reading that Apple has deployed the Apple Watch as being, you know, you can look at a website in your Apple Watch. So that's another break point to consider. And so, but all these things is, if you're continually enhancing your website, you're going to be thinking of these things. And if you're not, you're like going to say, oh, well, you know, maybe in 2022 when we remake our website, we'll think of that. The website can then officially become that cornerstone of your content strategy, because, I mean, it's been like 10 years, that one constant we've had in the web, because everything changes all the time. You know, I had, you know, that everybody wants Facebook, everybody wants a blog, everybody wants, you know, artificial intelligence or whatever. One cornerstone has been content is king. So if you're generating relevant content and it positions your company as a thought leader, has kept being true for the last 10 years and more. And so where does all that content, where's that hub for everything? It usually is your website. So that allows your website to be that hub if you're constantly enhancing it and upgrading it and making sure that it stays relevant. So we're talking about upgrading and enhancing the features and the way the website works, but obviously the other side of that is you have to have your content team constantly generating that content. And if we're looking for expert content, you have to have your, you know, senior consultants, depending on your team, have to be writing that content, and there has to be kind of a positive feedback loop on that sense. And as we said a bit earlier, so if we have all this content, we have all this interaction with the content, and we have an integration with all this digital ecosystem, we can make better decisions because we have all this data on how the user interacts with our content and our brand. So you can make those right decisions marketing-wise and justify, hey, we need to do this investment for this reason, and I'm expecting this return. Website administrators, enhanced management interface, because, and I think, again, there was another conference about this this morning, or maybe is it tomorrow morning, that you can enhance Drupal, which is really great, is you can enhance the back end of Drupal and kind of create a skin for the back end. We've done a lot of those because, you know, in the sense, if people are using, usually people know WordPress more, and WordPress's backend is exactly the same backend for everybody in the world, which is a good in one sense, but it's not good in another sense. And when there's complicated workflows of content deployment, it's not really adapted. And so and also you can create dashboards and stuff in Drupal, which is really great. If you're constantly updating your website, you can also get more granular permissions in there, and, you know, tweak them as need be for different types of users that are going to be logging in. And you're also going to be saving time and minimizing errors, because when you're going to map those workflows of how you guys are entering data, and based on real live data entry, you're going to be able to create automatic workflows that are going to save time when you're doing that data entry, or even if some data exists in another system, kind of synchronize it and make that automatically deployed. Again, saving time for your users. And finally, for the visitors, they're going to, all this effort is going to show, and they're going to say, hey, wow, these guys really invest in their website, they're investing in their brand, and they're investing in me as a client because they're helping me find what I want and have a great user experience. Or customer journey, which is the word these days. So yeah, so those are kind of the risks and the kind of what if you're not enhancing your website or maintaining it, and then the benefits of doing so. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how we can categorize the work that we're doing and a couple of ideas of what we should do. Before we go further, because I've been like talking fast, do you guys have any questions up to date about anything that I've said up to date? Okay, yes?
This is kind of a strange question, but if you look in the video game world, they always have these like test groups to test video games. Do you ever see any companies doing that with websites?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of what we call soft launches, So what they're going to do is they're going to take a specific number of users who represent the persona they're aiming for, and they're going to do like a soft launch for them of the pre-production of the new module or whatever, and say, hey, how do you guys like this? And give us your feedback. And being our best clients, you're going to have access or privilege to have access to this new feature. I'm actually doing that with a client, and we're going to deploy in a couple of weeks. And for about 2 months, we're going to check if they're interacting as we're expecting them with the website. And then we're going to be launching in September or October the final version of the website based on that. So I don't know if that answers the question. Yeah? Did you have it?
Just going way back to
2008? No.
But your first slide about why, with the exceptions.
Right.
The one that didn't see there was the site that, the Drupal 7 site.
Yeah.
It's so badly done. It should be thrown away.
That's a great question. We have inherited a lot of websites that were built by other developers, and that threshold is really difficult to identify because a lot of a website is I'm kind of an optimist in where I don't think people build websites that are badly built on purpose. It's either they didn't know what they were getting into, or stuff changed so often that they kind of didn't consider the full big picture. But if we're on a Drupal 7 website that it is not ideal, but the enhancement we would like to do, I'd still kind of continually maintain the modules of the security patches on a Drupal 7 website, and do small enhancements. I wouldn't kind of abandon it like that and wait for a redesign. I'd kind of do that while a potential redesign is in the works. What we've also done is just migrated Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 and not change anything in the design, just kind of migrate it over. So that's why I didn't necessarily add that case, and it's always a very personal. One developer is going to say, hey, this is shitty code and this is not well built, and then you're going to put it to another developer and say, yeah, it's not that bad. And so it's a difficult line.
I'll give you a specific example. A website where it's a major website for a fairly significant company, bit old, pre sort of mobile experience kind of, and they just want to make the homepage mobile friendly.
Okay.
And so when you look at it, it's full of embedded styles, embedded code, embedded PHP, embedded God knows what.
Right.
Because the marketing person fancied himself as a kind of engineer type
Yeah.
person, technically savvy.
Yeah.
Sounds like it did.
Yeah.
And he just went in there and plugged it all up.
Yeah.
Right? What can you do with it?
What I would do in that case is I ask them, is it worth the investment? So I'd say, you know what, doing what you got. One thing I wouldn't do is why would you just make the home page responsive? I'd say make the whole website responsive, and then I'd say, well, based on this and the way it was built and the way your guy kind of hacked it in his inexperience, doing this is going to be triple the amount of hours we would have taken. But then you compare that to doing a full redesign, and then say, hey, the full redesign is going to be double that cost, but this is going to have these benefits. And then at that point, you have to let the client make the decision on what is the return on that investment. What's the speed at which they need this website to be mobile friendly. But yeah, I think the return of the investment is going to be what you're going to justify that decision, because that can be done if the client is like, I need it done fast, and I don't have 100K to build that, and if it's going to take 30K to just mobile friendly it, just do it. So it might be a good decision.
To make a separation between the back end of dates and the front end of dates.
Mm-hmm.
You do when you do proposal to website, okay, you can maintain the back end, but for the design, you keep it that way, or you just make two proposals, or one for the whole thing?
When we're talking about, and I'm going to get into it actually in the upcoming slides, but when we're doing security patches and stuff like that, we're going to separate that as what we call the prevention pack. So that's stuff that we're doing to make sure that there's a longevity and flexibility of this website, and protection of the security. but the front end is going to be more project based usually, and say, hey, we want to enhance this section. It's either going to be a specific module that we're going to design and build, or we're going to restyle the skin. So that's going to be kind of two separate mandates. Yeah, and one is usually kind of ongoing, and the other one is kind of like each one is different. The ongoing kind of prevention is really something we do every month, and that we do the same thing every time just to make sure everything is compatible and secure.
And is that, if it's not indiscreet, is that hourly rate or?
Well, it's a great question because we tried both, and what happened is that the problem is that the complexity of one site versus another site makes that the prevention on one site is going to be way different than the other site, and it's difficult to foresee. So initially we said, hey, let's kind of try to make an average and have a fixed fee for all our kind of preventions. But right now we're switching over to having in banks of hours and saying we're estimating it's going to be about 50 hours in your year to do all the maintenance every month. But it might be a bit less, it might be a little bit more, and we'll keep you updated. Cool. All right, so let's get into how we approach it. So, prevention. So here, the goal here is to minimize the technical issues, security issues. The goal of what we're doing here, again, is really back-end work. It's updating the modules to the latest version, the community modules, the core modules, and also testing the compatibility with your custom modules that you have built. So in each website you built specific modules, and you can't just kind of click a button, because that's always the idea that the client has, is that, hey, but there's a page here, it says these modules are not up to date, click here and update. How come you guys are charging me like a couple hours for this? But it's like you have to push that button, you have to make sure it works, you have to test it on the in staging environment, and then deploy it onto the live environment. So that all takes time. Like in an ideal world, you have unit tests for testing stuff that is more risky. Like one website we had a lot of specific permissions for different access to content. So we created like a dashboard page which was like red or green, so that when we're doing a test deployment, it shows up, hey, this permission has been broken by whatever you updated on the website. So that's a type of unit test you can have. Otherwise, create manual tests. Because even if you're adding something or enhancing the website here or there, the way programming works is that the repercussions are not always clear of where else on that website that change is going to impact it. And so you should have a series of manual tests you do each time to say, hey, let's check this and this and this and this every time we deploy. And you can also install monitoring services like New Relic or whatever. Sometimes your hosting might have it integrated. And these are fees kind of ping your website and make sure that it's not down and stuff like that, so that it's not your client calling you up and saying, hey, my website is down. It's your client calling up the client saying, hey, we got notified the website was down, we fixed it, it's back up, by the way. Technical housekeeping. So, and part of this prevention and the time that we have around there's a couple of things that my developers told me that would be interesting to do, or that they like to do when we're doing these prevention packs. Now, some of these things I'm not being able to get into the details of because I'm not that technical. But what they like to do is to have a plan for those updates that we're doing in the prevention pack, like what's the order, why are we doing it this way, which are the most risky, and kind of plan that. Like for example, we're never going to update a site or whatever on a Friday afternoon or something, stuff like that. We have a plan for emergencies. So let's say something happens and there's like this major Drupal fail or whatever. We have a sequence of events that we go through. It's like, the bell rings and we all slide down the pole and then we do it. So we have a whole, sequence of events for all of our clients, and who do we call first, blah, blah, blah. It's important to write down, and this is something that often goes kind of, I think I know. And then a situation happens, and then people are pointing fingers, and they don't know who they're pointing fingers at, and just who's accountable for what in this website. And if something happens and does go down, where does it come from? Who should we be calling first? And how do we assign? What are the next steps? In an ideal magical world, we could also do some cleanup. You're just like, I'm not rushed at all. Like I have all kind of time. Let's just clean the code here and there. So that's, on very rare, occasions we can do that. And the deployment pipeline and the kind of Git branches can get really crazy, and it's good. It's good practice to kind of have a clear, what's your main branch and all that. And usually, that whole process of deploying is something we're really keen about because we have, we work with 10 to 15 developers. At the same time, they have to know how to collaborate and how those branches are going to be integrated. And, we don't have one guy on one project, and when that guy goes on vacation, then then that's literally what I guess they would say on the phone. Keep your test plan alive and build on top of it as you progress. So, we were talking about tests a bit earlier. So yes, you do those tests, you repeat them every time you do deployment, but what's even better is to enhance those tests every time. Say, hey, we could also add this to the test, and that part was kind of like a blind spot. Let's do that. So that's also kind of best practice. When you're improving the website, again, and that's if we have the time planned out and the schedule and all that, then devs can make recommendations, and oftentimes they make these technical recommendations that are good for the website, but that are not very apparent for the end user or the client at the end of the day, like what happens. So there's a lot of conversations and metaphors being used in those conversations, because saying, hey, client, we should spend 7 more hours doing this thing that you have no idea what's going to be the difference between now and after those 7 hours. We have to convince that client why that's important. Oops, sorry. Right, okay, so there's different settings for the environment. I'm not very, our team is not very sysadmin, but there's, just changing a server, changing a setting on that can have a major impact on the performance of the website and stuff like that. So you can't just kind of be application oriented. You have to see around there if there's any things that can help. Sometimes even it's APIs, you're fetching APIs, it's just slowing out the website or JavaScript stuff. And what's really important also is to take the time to write onboarding documentation, ideally at the end of a project, to make sure that everybody else who's going to be touching this project in the future can get onto the project and has a clear set of how this website is built, what are the modules, how do they interact, what lines of codes are the most important. And so when a new developer is going to come onto the project, he doesn't have to automatically talk with whoever was the first developer on it to get an understanding of where it is and how it's built. So that's all kinds of little tips and tricks to make sure that ongoing maintenance goes well. After that, to kind of do all the ongoing corrections, because there's 3, I'm going to get into the concept of the types of maintenance. So there's preventative maintenance, there's corrective, I know it in French, it's like préventif, correctif, évolutif. So corrective or whatever, fixing bugs maintenance so we were talking about the prevention. This is the fixing bugs part of it. So ideally you have to have a good idea of internally in your team or with your dev team that you're working with, what is the level of service you're going to be expecting from these guys or girls. So how fast, when something goes wrong and I have a bug request, how fast is someone going to get back to you and say, oh, thanks for sending that bug request, I have now acknowledged that. So what's your expectations there? That doesn't mean it's going to be fixed. So what's the expectation between having it acknowledged and having it fixed? What is that expectation? It has to be clear with whoever you're working with. And then after, and this is like a really concept that's very difficult for clients to understand, like what's really urgent and what's stuff we can do as we go along. And a lot of clients like to write urgent in emails and like in caps. And it's like urgent, like the image is not aligned on the contact page. That's not really urgent, but it's difficult to explain that to the client. And so we kind of clarify what urgent means and what like intermediate means and what ongoing means. So that's stuff that's important. And what we like to also say is like after a certain number of hours, we're always going to give you an estimate. So that some clients who have smaller scale stuff, like if it's just over 5 hours, we have to give you an estimate every time. Other clients are like over 15 or whatever. So that we can just, if there's something we want to fix, we just get in there, we fix it. But if we're expecting that fix to take more than X number of hours, we're going to tell the client, hey, this is going to take 10 hours. Is that okay with you? And then the client says, no, or yeah, great. And then we just do it. So that's all part of the agreement you have to have with the team who's going to be doing the ongoing maintenance of your website. So that's the correction, so the issues that are fixing the bugs and stuff. And then finally, there's the enhancements. So there's three. So there's prevention, correction, and then enhancing. And so the enhancement of the website, that's like the sky's the limit. And what's important in this context is to, well, first of all, have a list of all the stuff that's been discussed in the past. Because, like, how many times has a client said the same thing like 7 months later and like, yeah, but we have issue number 5372 and you said 7 months ago that you didn't want to do that and you want to do it this way. Like, ooh. Otherwise, they're just going to repeat the same thing on and on, especially if there's people changing in the client's team. Then you want to prioritize those based on, business value, and the value and also the effort. So they're kind of that kind of grid where if something has immense value and takes an hour and a half to do, like, do it now. And if something takes 55 hours to do and has zero value, like, take it out of your pipeline. But sometimes clients, get they're like, hey, this little thing here in the corner of the table is really an issue, and like we have to correct that. And like, we can. It's going to take 25 hours, but wouldn't your 25 hours be better spent on this thing that's really important here? And we have to have that conversation with the client. And what we like to do is to kind of divide again. So we have a prevention where we're doing the back end kind of maintenance, and then we like to divide ongoing kind of quick fixes from projects. So we have the ongoing quick fixes, which are banks of hours usually. So we say, here, client, take like 200 hours, and whenever you have an issue, we'll just kind of just go in there in that bucket and use it for that. So we don't have to sign a contract every time. And when it's a more important module, so for example, adding a new synchronization with a new API, or adding a completely new like a client section onto the website, well, those things are going to be more project-based, and they're going to be ongoing while the quick fixes and the corrections are in the bank of hours. So that's how we normally work. Final chapter. How much does this cost? Actually, I didn't really know this initially, and we kind of just played it by ear with the clients and had banks of hours and requests, and we never kind of did any evaluations of is there a trend. And then I met with a guy who was a consultant who worked with more kind of larger scale application type companies and had all these kind of indicators. And the numbers I'm going to show you in the next page are really based on the conversation I had with him, which is on his experience are really how you should plan budgets based on enhancements and maintenance. So rule of thumb, about 17.5% of the initial cost is what you should be spending per year. So if your website costs $100,000, then expect to spend about $20,000, or like 17.5, but let's say about $20,000 every year to maintain the website, to do the prevention, to correct the bugs, to do the tweaks, the support, whatever it is. On top of that is going to come your enhancements to the website, usually which are 5 to 10% of the original. So let's say you'd have that budget plus about a $10K for adding new modules or new projects. So when you're calculating your total cost of ownership, so you have year 0, which you're building the website, and then year 1, year 2, year 3, which are about 25 to 30%. So within 3 to 4 years, the cost of the initial website should be reinvested within the 3 to 4 years after that as an ongoing budget for enhancing, maintaining, and improving the website. And I think putting that into perspective right at the start of the project is really good to project and to have a good idea of being proactive with this, maintaining the website in the long term and making sure you're getting a good return on that investment, because otherwise you're going to be very reactionary. You're not going to plan for that, and every tweak, every correction, everything, you're like, I have to get a budget for this, I have to get a budget for that. If you're planning already out with this type of budget, it's going to help you sleep easy, and when something comes up, you go, great, I planned for that. This Drupal bug thing or Drupal get-in Well, great. It's part of, we plan for this type of event to happen, and it's in the budget. Or I want to add a new cool module that my marketing team said I want to integrate this with Instagram thingamajig or whatever. Well, great. We have the budget for that because we planned it out in advance. So that it's really important to see that going forward. So I kind of gave you an idea of what are the risks, what are the benefits, how to approach it, and the types of maintenance you can see, which are these basically bug fixes, prevention, support, and enhancements, and how much that should cost. Well, that basically is the gist of my conference. I had a slide called conclusion, but I was basically going to repeat what was already written in the conference, so I don't have it. So voila, merci beaucoup for having been there and being more than 6 people. And if you have any questions, would be a good time now. No? Well, great. Thanks for, and such a beautiful day. Being inside, it's great for me to have you guys around. So if you have any questions further down the line, send me an email at Symmetris, and I'll put this on SlideShare within the next couple of days. Thank you.